Welcome. My name is Lisa Williams, and I am the Associate Curator at the New Britain Museum of American Art, one of, if not the oldest museums dedicated exclusively to American art. We are thrilled that you can join us this evening for a discussion between celebrated contemporary artist and innovator, Shantell Martin, and Director and CEO of the New Britain Museum of American Art, Min Jung Kim. This program launches the opening of our current exhibition, New Now, Shantell Martin, which opens today. As many of you already know, Shantell Martin is among the most versatile artists working today and has become known for her exploration into the vast potential of the drawn line. Born in London, she studied at Central St. Martin's in London, and her work has been the subject of solo exhibitions at the Denver Art Museum, Lincoln Center, New York, Albright Knox Art Gallery, and the Museum of Contemporary African Diaspora Arts in Brooklyn. She has served as a visiting scholar at MIT Media Lab in Cambridge, Massachusetts, a fellow at Brown Institute of Media Innovation at Columbia University, and she currently teaches as an adjunct professor at NYU Tisch Interactive Telecommunications Program. Martin has collaborated with prestigious brands, including Tiffany & Company, Puma, Jose Cuervo, Max Mara, Art Basel Miami Beach, and American Express with Kendrick Lamar, and many others. New Now Shantell Martin at the New Britain Museum of American Art represents the artist's first career retrospective, featuring nearly 2 decades of work created in London, Japan, and across the United States. The show explores the evolution of Martin's artistic style and technique while highlighting key aspects of her output, including art, performance, commerce, and technology, and their myriad cross-sections, as well as a monumental site-specific mural created on the occasion of this show. The exhibition is part of the museum's major initiative that launched this year, entitled 2020 20+ Women at NBMAA, celebrating 100 years of women's right to vote. We have devoted all of our exhibition programming throughout 2020 and into 2021 to female identifying artists. We are tremendously grateful to our presenting sponsor, Stanley Black and Decker, with additional support from Bank of America. For those joining tonight, please feel welcome to post any questions in the chat box at the bottom of your screen to be addressed at the end of the discussion. And without further delay, I'm delighted to welcome Shantell and Min. I pass it over to you.
Thank you, Lisa. And welcome, everyone. I'm so delighted to have you join this conversation with Shantell Martin in celebration of your New Now exhibition here at the New Britain Museum of American Art. On the one hand, I'm disappointed that we couldn't all be together celebrating your exhibition in person. We would probably have crowds of people, but perhaps the one benefit might be is that we have this wonderful opportunity to have this conversation. And I'm just going to share with everyone, we have actually not discussed what we're going to talk about. We haven't planned questions or really sort of talked about the format of the conversation. And I think that might be something that we can just sort of talk through and sort of let the conversation flow somewhat naturally. So in many regards, I actually think this is so very special and so very intimate to be able to have this one-on-one conversation with you, Shantell. And I want to thank you first and foremost for your participation in this exhibition, which you and I started talking about doing something together, I think almost 2 years ago, if that's right. It started out really, we were beginning to explore, maybe even possibly you were doing a site-specific installation as part of our beautiful Lewitt staircase, which may still happen one day, but then that naturally progressed into talking about your work as it's evolved over time. I mean, Lisa talked about it from the perspective of a retrospective. You're still, I think, I almost like to consider it a mid-career retrospective because you've been so prolific thus far, and I'm sure there's so much more work to be done. But even in that 2-year period from when we first began talking to what the show looks like today, so much has happened. Perhaps to you personally, but certainly also in the world. Can you share with us a little bit about how your work and your artistic practice has evolved even in the 2 years and how it's really informed what we're seeing in the galleries today?
Yeah, so much has incredibly changed over those last 2 years. And firstly, thank you for taking the time for this. And, thank you to the New Britain to, supporting such a show and the incredible artists that they have done forever. And, for me, I think time's a little bit of a weird thing now. And having Lisa, I don't know if you have this feeling, but when people read your bio, it's always such a weird feeling. You don't know where it sits or how it sits. And when you hear someone talk about your bio, and then when you talk about this last 2 years and what's changed, you have those kind of, there's two time frames going on there. There's like the bio of your life in summary, and then just thinking about the last 2 years. And for me, this has been a big year. I had one of those big birthdays. I just turned 40. I had my first monograph release. I have this show opening. And so it's definitely a year of milestones piled upon this incredible year that we're having already for, many interesting reasons. And so this year has been really one of reflection, of internalizing past and present and where I want to go in the future. It's been one of structuring and restructuring and reorganizing and pivoting. It's been one where I've been trying to be organized and then also trying to be creative, and also one where I've been trying to use my voice and, using my voice from putting my message out there that I usually do with a pen, but using words. And, from a TED talk, from, sitting on my couch at home, or to using my voice as more of kind of an activist working with other artists to craft letters and responses to organizations and institutions out there in the world. So it's, the last 2 years have been very, very layered.
That's so interesting. And this show is so special in that it is really a convergence of your past reflections, but at the same time, given the live drawing of this monumental mural is also of a specific time now, and in a specific place at the New Britain Museum of American Art, which I'd love to delve into a little bit more. But before that, let's go back a little bit. As Lisa was talking about your bio, it's so interesting, given your time having grown up in England, and even your time that you spent in Japan, and also the time that you have spent, recently in a vast number of years here in the United States, all perhaps have in some way or another informed your work and your artistic practice, or has it? I guess is one question. And then I guess related to that, given this wonderful, almost very international sort of context that you're bringing to your work, how might that sort of play into the exhibition that you are doing here with us at the New Britain Museum of American Art as an American art museum, and one of, if not the oldest museums of American art? How does that sort of play into that kind of a dialogue for you?
Yeah, that was a lot of questions.
It's a lot, too much. Let's unpack it. Let's start with the beginning.
Let me think. I'll answer what kind of bubbles to the top. And firstly, I love creating site-specific work, and I love creating work in the moment. And we spoke a little bit about this, because when you create work live and spontaneously and intuitively, it speaks to where you are in that moment. It meets you where you are at that time. And that combined with this layered message as well, because when I'm drawing physically on the wall, I know that there's history in those layers of paint in that wall. And I know that the work I'm creating at some point will also be covered up and also then become a part, literally, of the structure of this institution. And this institution is an American art museum. It's one of the oldest in the country, if not the oldest. And then I'm seeing myself as someone originally from England who is Black, who is all of these other things, who at the time of the, the building of this literal building or institution, someone like me wouldn't have ever had the chance to be doing what I'm doing. So there's that reflection of literally imagining myself being a part of the walls and the future of the building in the walls, but understanding when those walls were potentially built at the origin of this museum, I wouldn't have played a part in that. So that there's like, these kind of conflicted rules or roles that play a part there. And, definitely coming from England, that shaped me in my work and molded me in one way. And there was a lot of baggage that I carried being from England. And then I went to Japan and kind of let go of that baggage, because I realized that, Japan was a whole different society and structure. And that helped me pivot in a different way. And then coming to the US, the same thing happened. And so definitely the environment speaks to my work and where I'm at. And, coming back to the wall meeting me where I'm at now, the site-specific work, I named it transparency. And the words appear: transparency, accountability, self-knowledge, feeling. And these are words that I think really resonate with myself and society. And, the perspective through my eyes of when I leave my house every day and walk around, and the kind of experiences I'm having.
That's fantastic. As you're talking about, in particular, the mural, as you were drawing it, it really is indeed, as you mentioned, a reflection of this moment in time for you. And yet, this exhibition was originally meant to open in May, I believe.
Yeah.
Of course, because so much has happened since May, so much has happened since February, with coronavirus, and really all of these national debates about a reckoning of racial injustice. There's been so much that has transpired in these few months. And I'm curious because in many ways, if we had opened an exhibition with you in May, it may have been a very different mural then than what we ended up seeing today. Can you talk a little bit about, these past few months, as you started out by saying, it has been really a moment, I think for all of us, myself included, of deep reflection, personally, professionally. And there have been a lot of quiet moments and a lot of moments of, at least for me, internal turmoil, existential questioning, etc. How do you think that may have played a part in what manifested at the end of the day in your drawing, both prior to the first moment your marker hit the wall to when it was finally finished and you took a step back and looked at it? I'd love to hear some of your thoughts on that.
Firstly, I think the last few months, what they solidified in me is this thankfulness for being an artist. Because, when we have times like this, I realize that, something like this pen, this gives me an outlet. This gives me a tool. This gives me a way of getting those weird, mixed, confused feelings about what's going on in the world and society and politics. I'm able to get that out and on a paper or on a canvas or on a wall. And I'm so thankful for that experience and for that exercise and for that tool. And I think we would all benefit from having that outlet, because I think that's something that not everyone has. And, these last few months, have been building up in me because I haven't been able to use that outlet as much as I would typically. And so that first moment where I walked into the New Britain Museum, I walked into the gallery space, I'm preparing to draw this 40-foot by 16-foot mural. I'm walking in with the baggage of the last 6 months. I'm walking in knowing that I haven't had that outlet or the chance to work or practice because, you know, pretty much a lot of things have been cancelled for me or I've been focused on other things. And so what that changed is it gave me that determination of, wait, can I still do this? It's been a while. Like, do I have that muscle memory? What's going to happen? What's going to come out? Is this going to be angry? Is this going to be, you know, what is this going to be? So I think that first line for me, it really sparked curiosity in what the work would be and what it would become, because I'm always talking about, I follow the pen, I allow the pen. So I'm not going there with a predetermined plan of what it should be or how it should feel like or who it should, you know, reference or what it should reference. I'm just following the pen and letting it tell me where I'm at. And that's such a beautiful moment when, you know, when I'm drawing, it's like a race for me. You know, I walk up to the wall, I start, and now it's about being smooth, it's about being efficient, it's about moving my body in a way where that pen is allowed to glide in all the ways that it can. And the feeling that I got when I finally stepped back and I looked at that mural and I looked at the drawing, that was what the last 6 months looked like to me. There was a lot of movement, there was a lot of space, there was important words that I felt like speak to this moment and this time where I am. And it was this culmination of things that I've always been thinking about as an artist. And that is, does progress exist? Will people ever be held accountable? We got to keep moving. We got to keep changing. We got to be creative. And I feel like all of those things flew out and flowed out of the pen in that space.
Yeah, that's terrific, because the mural transparency, I've heard you speak and we've had conversations. The words of accountability have been spoken, but from what I can tell, I don't think I've actually seen them in your work before. So it's really wonderful to see that kind of emerge in that process, indeed, because of so much conversations indeed about accountability really bubbling to the surface and almost sort of emerging. It was really quite wonderful to see that happen right before our very eyes.
Yeah. I'd love to ask from your perspective, you know, these are words that I'm always, you know, almost struggling with sometimes: accountability, transparency, progress. Do you think those things exist?
I think they must exist on the one hand, but I think they also mean different things to different people at different times.
Yeah.
And I think that's why the work that you do and it being so of the moment and so honest to the moment is really true. In that these words are important, these actions are important, but also understanding that that in and of itself has its own evolution as well, I think is also really important to recognize. So this is a really special moment for us in being able to do this exhibition and to do this very site-specific mural with you at this moment in time, not only as it represents you as an artist in your thinking during this particular period, but also us as an institution, right? And in thinking about our own role and our own responsibility as part of this as well. And to be thinking about this and discussing this together, I think makes it all the more meaningful.
Yeah. You know, I like something that we discussed before is that I often see my work like seeds. And you mentioned there's a Korean saying that, you know, it's like planting seeds. And I feel like the work that the museum's doing, the work that artists like myself and many other artists are doing, we're planting these seeds, and those seeds grow within people if and when they're ready, if ever. Not to say if they do, you know, we don't know where those seeds go or what they grow into, but it's the job of institutions and artists in a way to keep planting them.
Absolutely. Hey, that was such a great conversation because I did have an opportunity to share some of the Korean sayings that indeed words do become seeds. It's also a little bit of a caution to be careful with your words, but also knowing how they must be nurtured and they can grow into some wonderful things. But you're right. And I believe that not only individually, but certainly institutionally, we are not only stewards of our collection, we are only here momentarily. This might be a kind of Buddhist Zen moment, but it's really also about what we can do for our future generations and the future at large. And I think we each play a role in that. But at the end of the day, it takes all of us to bring it along. So I think in that regard, you know, one of the other sort of questions that I wanted to ask, in addition to words, which mean so much to you, you know, and there are specific imagery that you use as well, but also just the simplicity of line. And not all lines, of course, are the same, including lines that continue versus lines that break. If I may even call them sort of pauses, if you will, as opposed to a continuity of actions. I've noticed that in this mural, there are quite a number of these dots compared to these contiguous lines. Am I imagining this? Does that mean something to you? And does that have anything to do with, I have to say, watching you draw, Shantell, is really mesmerizing. There's a sort of hypnotic, mesmerizing quality, and there's also a dynamic quality to it as well. And you see that sometimes in what your hand and your pen actually translates on the wall itself.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about these dots or these pauses, or how you would describe them and what they might mean?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, not all lines are equal. You know, they're all different and they mean different things. And if anyone's seen me do a live drawing, I love doing live drawing for many reasons. You know, I feel like if people are watching me draw live, firstly, it keeps me honest because I don't have time to think about what I'm doing. So therefore, I don't have time to hesitate or be insecure or to try and be anyone else. I can only be myself. And it also exposes the process. And often when I do a live drawing, I say, I start with this big line, and this line is the DNA. And once I've drawn the DNA, there's parts of the line that remind me of faces. So I draw faces, and parts of the line that remind me of landscapes. So I do landscapes. And then when there's moments when my mind goes blank, I just go dash, 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 dash. Look busy, look professional, keep moving. And so up until pretty much this mural, these dash, 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 short line, these moments have been about pausing, about having that mental break, about stopping. And so it was my surprise when I stepped back from completing the work there, that it was full of these dashes. It was full of these moments. And typically there's only 2, 3, 4, 5 of those moments, but this mural, it was full of them. And that was interesting because I had to really just start to digest that and try to start to think about why are these moments that usually for me mean take a break, or I'm not thinking about anything, take a pause. This place is full of them. And I think what that means is a couple things. It means that I have taken a break and I have paused and been on this little bit of a hiatus. Maybe it's a message for the future to continue to pause. Maybe it's an extension of the words that I use often, do less and be more. Take these bigger moments, these bigger events, these bigger exercises, and create more out of them by doing less. And so I think this is a piece about transparency, it's a piece about accountability, but it's also a piece about peace and taking pause and taking a moment and taking a break and really starting to recalibrate to see what is important to us. Because we won't get any of those bigger, higher view things if we're not taking a break, if we're not standing back, if we're not taking a pause to see what's actually important to us all.
That's fantastic. That's great. That's great. You know, so much of your work has literally, your drawings have leapt off the pages, leapt off the canvases as they are on the walls. And we see it in the many collaborations that you have done. We see it in your interest in technology, your interest in fashion. We're so lucky that we also have, as part of this exhibition, a new collaboration that you did with furniture, with Lynette Rose. I hope I'm pronouncing the very, very high-end furniture brand name accurately. Can you tell us a little bit more about some of these recent collaborations that you've done and any more that you have on the horizon?
Yeah, I'm always a big fan of collaboration, not competition. And I'm always a big fan of, if it's something you're interested in, then do it. And there's always been this hesitancy, and it's been well founded, but there's been a hesitancy with artists to change medium or to explore different industries. And I've always had this philosophy, and I think it grew when I moved to Japan and seeing how collaborative and open everyone was there. So moving to America from Japan and having this experience where everyone was very collaborative there, I came here thinking, I'm going to work with whoever I want, wherever I want, whenever I want, if it's something that I can do to a high standard, if I'm curious about it, if it's something that we can make that exposes the work or the product to a different demographic, if it's something that can take my message and kind of explode it or make it more impactful in a way. And so collaboration is such a powerful tool that artists benefit from leaning into and discovering, regardless if it's a furniture brand or a clothing brand or a technology brand. For me, I have this foundation, which is drawing. It's so simple, but then you can show that you can literally take a line and put that on cars, on clothes, on people, in commercials, on buildings. And if you're doing it in a way where you're excited about it, you're doing it to a high quality, then why not? And so I've got to work on some really incredible collaborations, and there's a lot coming up in the future. And I'm always like, what's going on? I have so much going on that I can't remember what's going on. But lots of stuff that I'm excited by. Also, another interesting thing is sometimes you get caught up in this bigger is better thing. And you could see that in the installations I started to do. They started to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And so along the way, I've learned that it is great to grow and expand and make these collaborations larger than life, but it's also good to come back and make them small and intimate and bespoke and limited or kind of cozy in a way, because then you get to really be upfront and personal with people or the audience and the crowd versus, the other way.
Shantell, I think one of the many reasons why certainly we have and many others have considered you to be one of the most versatile artists working today is really your openness to collaboration. And just in hearing what you're saying, using words like curiosity, discovering, I've also believed that the best forms of collaborations are ones that don't have these preordained sort of results, like let's collaborate for the sake of collaborating, number one, and number two, let's get from point A to B. Rather, I think embracing a little bit of ambiguity.
Yeah.
I think you find these really lovely, whether it be accidents or discoveries, emerge, and know that sometimes it's not necessarily contained within a certain scale, whether it be large or big. or as objects or more ephemeral. I think that openness is certainly something that you, your work, and your artistic practice has really embodied, including this wonderful message that you continue to convey about both the simplicity, but also the power and the vast potential of the drawn line, and really how empowering that is, that anyone can do this. So with that, and especially given that your show is in the context of a major initiative for us, 2020, 20 Plus Women, where we've really made it a point to celebrate for not only the entirety of this year and into next, but also to launch really our ongoing and long-term commitment to give greater voice and to amplify really many, many artists, deservedly so, who are women, female identifying, women of color, because really, truly, unless we're fully representing all of these voices, we cannot be representing all of American art. So in this context, any words that you might be willing to share for either women, young girls, men, everyone who might be sort of listening in about really the kind of message that you're conveying as part of your work.
Well, you mentioned one of them, which is curiosity, and I'll add two more, which is play and kindness. And I think if you can create this space where you're being curious, where you have moments of play, and where you're kind, I feel like that one thing leads to another, leads to another. And it's interesting, I had an experience when very early I moved to New York in 2009, and I was talking to someone who had a horrible day at work that day. She worked with a lot of artists, and this particular artist that she had to work with that day made her cry. And I was like, well, why are you working with that artist if they made you cry? And she said, because they're important. And that moment, very early on in moving to New York, I realized that, hey, yeah, I want to be an important artist, but also I want to be a kind artist. And I want to show and be an example and a role model, and to show that you can be kind and you can be hardworking and you can be talented and you can be all these other things. And there's no excuse to be anything other than that. And so I think kindness, playfulness, and curiosity are so important for all of us. If you're an artist or not, regardless, we all have those traits and those qualities. And we should find moments to water them, to help them grow.
Absolutely. The world could be such a better place if everything was about kindness, curiosity. And
there we go. We just solved all the world's problems right there.
Well, Shantell, I could probably talk forever, as I love to talk about with you, but I think there might be a few questions that I have not been looking at the chat box, but Lisa, might you help us maybe address some of these questions and we can see if we can answer them? Oh, you're on mute.
Questions? Yes, I'm absolutely happy to help MC some questions, and I see that they span very broad subjects. So perhaps kind of starting at the origin, Shantell.
Okay.
Anne Sheffield has asked if your art has changed much over time since childhood, just in terms of your interest in art, your use of materials. It'd be interesting to kind of hear.
Yeah. Yes and no. You know, I have some drawings that I found when I went to my mum's a few years ago, and they're probably my earliest drawings from when I'm 6 or 7. And, you know, I'm drawing a caterpillar or I'm drawing a bird, and, you know, they're like a 6 or 7-year-old drawings, you know, very different from what I'm doing now. But then when I get to about 11, 12, I start to find drawings of characters and of people and of landscapes and words and naming things. And then when I get to 18, 19, 20, I find work that is totally dark. It's very word heavy. You know, it's the work of a very kind of depressed, lost teenager or young adult. But there are commonalities throughout the whole work where even at a very young age, I wasn't using color. It was all about line work. And then from there are these recurring words and faces and landscapes and people. And the crazy thing is even now when I think, oh, like, this is so good, I just created this whole new drawing and I wrote this interesting phrase or this question, it feels like it's new. And then I'll find the sketchbook from 20 years ago and it's very similar, or I've wrote the same question. So I think as artists, we have a core in us or within us that we're consistently extracting over and over again, but perhaps in different ways and different forms and in different mediums.
And I think the opportunity to showcase some of your early sketchbooks in this exhibition will give visitors incredible insight to the evolution of your drawing, and seeing some of that kind of core DNA, some of those interests that you've returned to, those motifs, those themes that you've returned to again and again. So we're really excited to be able to show those. And kind of along those lines, I found it really interesting looking at your sketchbooks, some of the artists that you refer to or illustrators that you refer to as being influences. Tying back to one of the questions that's come in about what has influenced you, you know, in terms of artists, but also mosaics or cave paintings. Did you know Keith Haring? Some of these sources that others read into your work. So if there are artists or illustrators, but also other aspects of the work that influence the form.
You know what, I think I was very fortunate in that, you know, I did go to art school. I went to art school for the first time in 1999 when I started Camberwell College of Arts. And I, at that time, and still, was very dyslexic. Just the difference was in 1999, we didn't really have personal computers or smartphones. And so how we learned about other artists was going to the library. And I completely avoided the library because it was full of books and I didn't read books. So why would I go there? And so what that meant is that all through art school, it was more about this process of self-exploration, self-extraction, dealing with my environment and trying to use art as a tool to deal with those things. And then even going to Japan, you know, that's when we started to use computers more and more and more. But in Japan, then I got into meditation, and that was a whole other level of extraction. And, you know, what I've come to find is that to be inspired, you've got to be inspired from the inside out. And so I find it conflicting when I think about it now, how art teachers teach us to look at other people's art to find our own art. And I think I am fortunate that at the time of really discovering art as a tool, I wasn't being bombarded with all of these other influences. So it was more of a practice of inspiration through extraction versus consumption. And, you know, I recommend that for anyone. If you're looking for your identity, for your voice, for your style, I had this practice of drawing live in Japan at clubs. So the music would start and I would just start drawing. And I would do that for hours and hours and hours and hours, for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks, just drawing, extracting, extracting, extracting. Later on, then people can make comparisons or, you know, reflections, because there's work to reference now. And, you know, some of the artists or influences that you mentioned, maybe some of these artists were going through a similar practice of, you know, working in the moment, of extracting. Mm-hmm. And so it's definitely been an interesting journey, which, you know, I recommend other artists and I recommend school teachers. You know, in art class, we should be meditating, we should be extracting, we should be putting the timer on and being like, go, draw, 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 draw. And then looking back at all of that work to see what people are doing recurringly, because those are the clues and the hints for each of our own style and identity.
Mm-hmm. It's incredible to hear that. And also in some of the videos and some of the interviews that we've got playing on the monitor in your show, where you talk about how your experience as a VJ, a visual jockey in clubs in Japan, really sort of sent you on this journey that you continue to be on today of the live drawing and creating in the moment. And I hope that everybody who's joining us tonight goes on to YouTube, looks up Shantell Martin's YouTube channel, because there's some phenomenal videos that show you VJing in Japan. And it's amazing how your live drawings are projected in the environment and how it sort of becomes art and performance at the same time. And even watching you create your live drawing in our galleries, there is an element of dance. Watching you kind of perform, you're so graceful and you're also kind of responding to the music that you're playing. And it's interesting, some of the collaborations you've done with dancers. So I thought also it might be nice to just clue folks into the collaboration that you did with the New York City Ballet. We have one canvas from that collaboration on view in the museum. And then you've also got another collaboration with the Boston Ballet coming up. So that constant, that multidisciplinary fine art, the visual and the performance kind of coming together is so interesting.
Yeah, it comes back to that collaboration aspect. And in Japan, as a visual jockey, as a VJ, doing visuals to DJs and dancers and musicians, it's all about collaboration. And so now it's interesting, 2019, I collaborated with the New York City Ballet and, took over the promenade and opened up shows on stage, in collaboration with some of the dancers or choreographers there. And so that was a really interesting kind of new revelation or revolution of that. And next year, if all works out well with the world, I'll be choreographing my first ballet for the Boston Ballet. And reimagining everything, backdrops, costumes, what's the music. And so that's really exciting because that takes this idea of collaboration and drawing, but just pushes it to a different level. And I love that idea of, it doesn't matter what industry or medium you're working in, if it's coming from a good place and good intention, and it's coming from you, you can do a ballet, you can play music, you can do all of these things.
Yeah, absolutely. And the fact that somebody has a question also about your materials and it's and what your actual materials are, what your tools are. And it's interesting because it seems like across spanning your collaborations, you're using the same materials essentially.
Yeah, and that's why I love pens, because you can walk into the New Britain Museum, you can walk into my show and you can see all these incredible, collaborations or works. But at the end of the day, it was all made with something so accessible, with a pen. And that's something that all of us as children, as adults, have access to. And so I love the power of the line, the power of the pen. And maybe that's why I'm so obsessed with it, because it is so accessible. And that accessibility is a gateway, it's a bridge, it's a door, it's a window for people like myself to climb through, jump out of, roll out of, and create these careers for ourselves that other people might not have imagined that we could do.
That's great. Well, especially given that the drawing can then sort of expand into so many different forms. And this idea that you're going to be choreographing dance actually is so fascinating, to be able to think about your work in a sort of not only a performative, but a whole three-dimensionality in space is really interesting. So I think to take the simplicity of the line, but also the potential of it into so many different ways is really inspiring.
And everything starts with a line, dancers on stage, that's a line, the line is so powerful and there's so many uses for it.
Mm-hmm. So another question that's come in from Rashmi, and I know when you were visiting the NBMAA last week, we were talking about books that we were reading. Rashmi asked, how influential is your reading material in your choice of text in your art? Does that factor in?
Yeah, so actually I'm almost through my second book of this year, and I probably haven't read a whole book in 20-30 years. And so, that's one thing I'm thankful for this year. Seeing all of Min's books there, I'm like, wow, like that's a lot of books. But so reading material, not that influence in my life at all, really. But what does is conversations. You know, I'm curious about people. I love talking to people, especially that people who are smarter than me or have a different perspective than me or have had a different background to me or educated differently to me. I love talking to those people because you'll always learn something. And also just kind of, I live in Jersey City, so let me learn about the history of the building I'm in, or the park that's across the road, or the road that my building's on. And so I think just that curiosity of places and people has always been something that I've had since I was a kid.
Mm-hmm. And the way that you give back also to kids, just to touch on one of the collaborations that you just did, or one of the projects, maybe not necessarily collaboration, but the project in Rockaway that immediately preceded this project, where you created a huge drawing on the parking lot, and there was an image of you kind of really interacting with the community, and school children, was really really poignant to see you kind of like really investing in that community too.
Yeah, so that's in the playground in Rockaways, and there's I think it's PS347, maybe I got that wrong, but so there's a really large playground, and so I work with the Friends of the Seaside Playground to envision something for the community, because the community also use that playground, and something for the school children. And so I love those types of projects because it's accessibility. You know, the children walk out and now they run along the lines, and, you know, the black surface is the lava, and the lines are, you know, kind of the safe spaces. And they've been making all of these games up. And I got to Zoom with a couple of the classes the other day and asked them how they were interacting with the drawing. And they were so curious about how it was made and how they could make their own games or their own drawings. So that was exciting. And actually, it's funny, today, my 8-year-old niece, Daisy, called me from England, and she said, you know, Shantell, you know, it's Black History Month. And I was like, okay, so it's Black History Month in England. And she said, you know, today we were learning about some artists, and my teacher showed a video of yours, and, you know, I screamed and said, that's my auntie. And she said, everyone didn't believe me. And they said, you know, it's not true. But you are, you know, and so for me, that was so exciting because, you know, my niece is living and growing up where I grew up. And, you know, I think it's incredible that the class or the teacher can now show my work, and show my work as someone that is from there, that is perhaps, you know, different to a lot of how they look, but is on this path and doing these things. And then to have my niece be able to be like, I know that person, you know, just for that, you know, it makes all of these things worth it. Just for those children running across your lines and being curious about it and making up games about it, just for those things, you know, we always say like, do it for the kids, but that means so much on so many levels, because you're also doing it for yourself and the kid in you. Mm-hmm. And that's what keeps us going, and partly keeps us going as well.
You must have appeared like a superhero to your niece, which kind of brings me to another question. I noticed in the chat box, someone was asking about whether you had any interest in children's books. And I know that you've expressed an interest in maybe one day doing a comic book, right? Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit more about that, which I find so fascinating?
Yeah, and I spoke to Lisa about this for a long time. You know, I've always wanted to create this children's book / comic book. And, you know, it's this superhero drawing girl from Thamesmead in London, this big concrete, you know, projects estate. And she finds, you know, by going away and finding meditation, you know, it's a little bit self-biographical, but I want to create a comic book where the superhero draws, and they draw themselves out of certain realities, and they imagine futures and goals and dreams through the pen and through the power of line. And these imaginations and dreams and hopes come true because that's the superpower. And so, you know, if anyone out there, you know, has any ideas and wants to help me make that a reality, you know, I think that's a comic book that I would have loved to be a 7, 8, 9, 10, 15-year-old and read and imagine the possibilities, start to daydream about the possibilities of where a line could take me.
That's great. Again, words become seeds, lines become more dreams. I think that's a great idea. Somehow we'll need to make this happen, whether the New Britain Museum is involved or not, because I think it would
we're planting seeds.
An incredibly powerful message for children.
I think we can't possibly end on a better note than that. I saw a question about whether or not you would think about doing a children's book. And in addition to the comic book, I know, Shantell, we have here at the museum your Wave comic book, which you created years ago, which visitors can come and look at and see on your show, but also buy and use at whatever age they are.
Yeah. So there's a coloring book called Wave, and you can pick that up at the shop. You know, you can also pick up lines at the shop and some stickers at the shop. So if you make it out to the show, you know, pop by the shop on your way out too.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Min, and thank you, Shantell, for sharing this incredible conversation with us. It has been just an honor to be able to listen in and hear your insights and interpretations, which are so inspiring and so timely. And I hope everybody listening in is able to come to the museum, visit the show. You can purchase tickets online. But in the meantime, we'll be rolling out some really phenomenal programs related to the show, including a gallery talk on November 4th. So thank you, everybody. I wish everybody a really wonderful evening. Thank you, Shantell and Min, again, and everybody who joined us tonight, and hope to see you at the NBMAA again very soon.
Cool. And I'll just say thanks again, Min, Lisa. Thank you for everyone for tuning in. And also, you know, thank you for believing and in supporting artists like myself who are not on this traditional path, so to speak, that are imagining different ways of being and doing and sharing and creating. And it's so important that there are institutions and people behind those institutions like yourselves that, you know, take chances and take risks and also support and encourage at the same time. So, you know, thank you so much. It's been a complete honor.
Thank you, Shantell. You can tell we are absolute fans of your work. And now, having worked with you once, you know, it's all about continuing these wonderful relationships that we establish. And hopefully this is not only just the beginning of our relationship with you, but many others that you will hopefully help us as we expand our concentric circles, because there are just some extraordinary artists out there. And we're already beginning to scheme about some future projects. So for everyone listening in, stay tuned. There's more to come that we'll be doing with Shantell. But please come and see the show. It's really an extraordinary evolution of Shantell's work in the last 2 decades. And we know that there's even more exciting possibilities. Come and see the exhibition. And thank you all so much for joining us tonight.